Okay, so we are getting started. Just a few more people joining us. Welcome, good evening. My name is Val Walters. I'm the Executive Director of the Ryan Bartel Foundation. Welcome to another one of our monthly parental panel discussions. We started these a while back, right about as COVID started, as our proverbial water cooler, as a way to get parents information on kind of the hot topics as it relates to youth mental health, and again, aligns with our mission of preventing youth suicide. We've got some great speakers, and the topic today is one that hits home to me as a parent of two teenage girls. Stress and pressure is really something that impacts me, and I'm sure a lot of other folks who I speak to, other parents, I know that it's a topic that is a hot button. Before we get started, I do want to introduce you to the foundation. Again, we're a youth suicide prevention organization, nonprofit in Loudoun County, and we are working with teens and parents to build resilience. And we do that through several different programs. I wanted to just give you a very quick glimpse at the programs that we do for teens and for families. We have our FORT program, which is going to be on January 22nd at Fusion Academy in Lansdowne. That's the 3-hour program, and it's very experiential, very hands-on. And kids are going to come to the fort this month, and they're going to do Tai Chi, they're going to learn about music, and we're going to do vision boards. So the kids come, they pick 2 different workshops that they want to participate in, and while they're doing a very tactile experience, we try to talk to them about the mental wellness benefits of doing those activities. So our goal is that they walk away with a coping skill that they can use when they're feeling stressed, when they're feeling anxious, when they're feeling sad or lonely. Again, you can register your teens for that program online on our website, and I will put the website link in the chat. This week, we launched our resiliency workshops, and those are happening in Ashburn and in Lansdowne. We've broken it up to middle school and high school, and this is a 6 weeks program that the kids can participate in and really build on those resiliency skills. For the kids who want a little bit more, who really want to process their emotions, we've launched our teen support groups, and those happen once a week for 4 weeks. And that's, again, you can look for the schedule and times of that on our website. And then we have parent support groups that we're doing. The next parent support group is going to be on January 25th, and that's going to be virtual. We've done them in person, but I think, just accounting for travel time and people's very busy schedules, we're going to try to do a virtual parent support group. So that will be, again, on the 25th, and you're welcome to register yourself for that. All of our programs are very nominal fees, if not free, and we never turn anybody away for financial reasons. So, feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to discuss getting your teen registered for any of those programs. So now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our not so new program manager, Jennifer Montez, who's going to talk to you a little bit about tonight's program and introduce our 2 speakers.
Hi, I am Jennifer, the program manager, and I help come up with the curriculum and the planning for some of the programs that Val previously mentioned. I'm really excited to hear more about this topic because in my short time here at the Ryan Bartel Foundation, I've gotten a lot of feedback from the teens about how the academic and social pressures are some of the most challenging things going on in their lives at the moment. So without further ado, I'm going to let Denisha introduce herself first, and then Sushita.
Okay, well, I am Denisha Hamilton, and I am a licensed clinical social worker working as a mental health therapist. I have a group mental health practice located in Sterling, Virginia, but we have virtual options so I can see clients throughout the state of Virginia, and I'm also licensed in Maryland. My focus is on teens and on young adults because I found that those are some of the most challenging growth periods, and providing that support and just being a listening ear is something that I think we all need. I'm also on the board of directors for the Ryan Bartel Foundation, and I've done lots of these parent panels and cannot wait to talk to you guys about teens under pressure.
Thank you.
Suchita?
Yes, my name is Suchita Pallett. I'm a licensed professional counselor, licensed in Virginia, and I'm currently working as a student assistance specialist for Loudoun County Public Schools. So in that role, I work with students and families directly, as well as staff at the schools providing prevention, and early intervention and prevention education, and brief counseling and supportive resources to students around mental health, and specifically substance use and substance abuse needs.
Thank you, guys. So we are going to launch a poll to ask 3 different questions to gauge how many of your teens are struggling with some of these issues right now. So we're going to launch it right now.
Launched.
Thank you.
We've got some answers coming in. Just waiting for a few more respondents to complete their poll. So the first question is, does your teen have any free time on the weekends outside of school of extracurricular activities? And yes, and kind of. So we have some free time. The second question is, how many extracurricular activities is your child involved in? 1 seems to be the most, and then we've got 2 to 9 is the next biggest number. And then did your teen do any homework or college applications during their holidays? And I'm happy to say that 7 out of the 10 folks who've answered that question said no. So.
Awesome. Well, in regards to today's topic, so some background information. So academics tops the list for one of the biggest pressures that teens face today. 61% of teens say they feel a lot of pressure to get good grades. By comparison, about 3 in 10 say they feel a lot of pressure to look good, and 28% say they feel pressure to fit in socially. Also, roughly 1 in 5 teens feel similarly pressured to be involved in extracurricular activities and to be good at sports. But the parental push to raise an uber successful child has also never been felt more keenly. So much so that researchers have a name for it, which is called child contingent self-esteem. And it's the tendency for a parent to base their own self-worth on the success of their child. Parents now spend more time than ever on schoolwork with their children, while time spent simply hanging out has declined. Meanwhile, between 1986 and 2006, the number of kids who said their parents surveyed their every move has actually doubled. And so that being said, I'm going to hand it off to Denisha to get started with our first topic for today's panel.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. So I'm actually surprised that most kids did not do college applications or schoolwork over winter break. That actually makes me very, very happy. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what the word success means and how we as adults and parents define success, and if that is the same or different than how our teens define success. I will say, in my experience, the answer to that question is absolutely, we define it by 2 different things. So typically for adults, we define success as grades, productivity, working, something very tangible, something that we can see the end result from. For a lot of teens, especially teens that are dealing with any sort of mental health challenges, success for them may be the small things that we don't even think about. It could be the I got out of bed when I really didn't want to. And I talked to someone in class when I was uncomfortable, or I raised my hand in class, or I really wanted to, cut today, but I didn't. And we don't often notice those things because they're a lot of times happening internally for our teenagers, but that is a success for them, that they had these thoughts and they had these feelings, and then they worked the coping skills that they have to not act on those thoughts. I remember recently sitting with a family. It was mom, dad, and a teenage girl. Teenage girl has very high aspirations. And I will say, we'll talk a little bit about this later, that I also recognize that teenagers put a lot of pressure on themselves. And I don't know if it's because we are so close to DC, or there's something about this area where we are very, very driven and we are very, very motivated. So I want to be clear that I'm not pointing fingers at any parents, because I also have the group of teenagers that's the parents are like, I don't care what their grades are. I'm perfectly fine with wherever they are, but they're doing this to themselves. Again, that comes from a social pressure that we will talk about a little bit later. But I recently, during a family therapy session, had a mom that said to me something along the lines of, if I'm not pushing my daughter to do well in school and I'm just focusing on mommy-daughter time and like girl dates, am I still being a good mom? And that broke my heart. Because absolutely, you're still a good parent if you are focusing on the emotional health of your child, if you are focusing on building those relationships, improving communication, all those other worldly skills that we all need. But for this mom, if she wasn't talking about school, talking about college, pushing her daughter to the next level, she felt like she had failed as a mom. And so mom and I had a brief conversation about what that means. And Jennifer brought up a little while ago how as parents, there is this pressure that if my kid isn't successful, then what does that mean about how I raised them and what I did for them? And am I setting them up for failure? So I will tell you guys something that I say to parents pretty much daily. Most of us are not the same people at 14, 15, 16 when we turn 26, 27, 28. And we should not judge who we think our kids are going to be in the future by what they are doing right now. So let's think about, for your kid, what success might look like for them. If you have a kid that really, really struggles in math and they get a B, let's celebrate that B. Let's be proud of them for that B, because that B took a lot of work and a lot of effort. We don't all have to be straight A students. You guys are all spending your Thursday night talking to me. You have no idea what my GPA was. You have no idea if I was the smartest person in my class or the dumbest person in my class. I wasn't dumb, I promise you guys. But I shared that with students quite often, because I think that they think that this is what their worth is. If I don't have that A+, if I don't have those 6 AP courses, if I didn't take dual enrollment classes, then somehow I can't be successful in the future. And I will say, do you even know what college I went to? Do you know what my GPA was? Do you know what your mom's boss's GPA was? That's not how we measure people when we are adults. So let's not measure our children by that either. So what I would encourage everyone to really think about what success means for you, what it means for your child, and not compare to what anybody else's children are doing. I also think it's important as parents that we set short-term and long-term goals for our teens. So I will use the phrase that we want to parent our children not only for who they are right now, but who we want them to grow to be. And so I'm not going to hold my 14-year-old to the same level or accountability that I would at 24. That doesn't make any sense. And that's not fair. That's not fair to us. That's not fair to them. Just like a 10-year-old, I'm not going to expect them to act like a 16-year-old. And so oftentimes, I remember my mother saying this to me a gazillion times. At 14, I wasn't thinking about what a full-time job was or what I was going to do. Those things were not important to me. So she wasn't talking to me at a level that I could understand in this moment. So thinking about where we all were at 14, tap into that. I think that's a great parenting tool to tap into who you were at 14, 15, 16, and what did you need to hear from your parents? What would you have needed to hear from your grandparents or your aunts or uncles, and thinking about that. So if you have a kid that, let's say, is struggling with anxiety, let's talk about what some short-term goals for your child with anxiety may look like. That could be learning coping skills. Am I helping them to practice those coping skills on a daily basis? Am I helping them to just be okay emotionally with coming and talking to me and communicating to me? Maybe your child is a kid that doesn't go to school regularly, so there's a lot of school refusal there. We don't have to go to 5 days a week. Can we start with 1? That's a short-term goal, but our long-term goal is, yes, we want you to go to school 5 days a week. So having conversations with your children, thinking about what those goals are, make it a team effort. We oftentimes, as parents, as adults, we feel like we have to, we know it all and we have to tell our kids what to do. I promise, if you stop talking and you ask them what they want or what they need, they know it. And they'll tell you, as long as that they know that it's coming, that they will not be judged or be told that what they're doing is immature or stupid or wrong. I'd love to say that all of us have those A+, 6 AP kids. We don't. And it's okay. We don't all have to. But do we have an emotionally strong child? Do we have a kid that understands how to support a peer? Do we have a kid that when they are struggling, they work really, really hard to do better? That is a skill set that I think all of us as parents want to see that our kids have, not how many AP exams they took, not did they get into, all the big name schools in Loudoun County, in Virginia. It's great to get into the William and Mary's and the UVA and all of that. Those are awesome. But all of us don't have to have that kid. And that does not mean that you have failed as a parent. You are still successful and your children are still successful.
Those are some really great topics to bring up, Denisha. Thank you. I thought that was really interesting what you were saying about how we measure success, because I think in that moment, we think it's the end of the world if we don't do amazing on this specific thing. And then 15 years later, you don't really even know what you were stressing about in the first place. And I look back personally to the times where I was so stressed over some test in a subject I can't even remember. And the thing I remember from it is the support I got from my support system, rather than whether or not I did well on that test or not. So, Suchita, do you have anything to add to that topic?
I agree completely. I think that the communication, and actually like my thoughts on my topic were kind of piggybacking off of Denisha's and kind of going into some of what those conversations, if it's not measuring success by our barometer of what we're used to, what else can we do, or how else can we communicate with our teens to kind of empower their self-concept. But yeah, I agree completely as far as how we're equating success, how we're defining success. And I think the last thing I want to say about that is that recognizing sometimes when I'll have conversations with parents talking about like, yes, we have wisdom and experience that we're bringing that we want to kind of impart upon our teens, but also recognizing that who I was at 15 years old and the things that I learned through trial and error and time are mine, and they may be very well valuable. And the 15-year-old growing up in 2023 is not something that I have lived experience as. I might have lived experience as a 15-year-old, but not one growing up currently and growing up with some of the unique challenges that our teens are facing today. So I think keeping that in mind is also useful, is where we might be able to look ahead and see some of the things that we would have done differently, or want to kind of encourage our youth to do differently, or push them on, but also recognizing like we didn't grow up in a life or circumstances with how like tapped into, and I know we'll talk about this later, but just the screen time, how on our teens have to be all the time. I think that in and of itself presents a unique challenge, and just like the state of economy, like everything, even like just success and the path to achievement may not look the same for our youth. And I think just keeping that in mind is helpful.
We have a chat. Val said you are welcome to put any questions in the chat or send them to us directly. So feel free to ask anything that comes up to mind. Suchita, yeah, I thought that was really interesting about how we constantly see success. I think we don't really realize that people don't put their failures or their insecurities all online. They only put the sports team they made or the good grade they got or what college they got into. And so consuming all of that can be a lot and very overwhelming for teens as they're going through that developmental stage of their life. And I think that goes up into your next topic about consuming different content.
So for me, what I was thinking about when it came to this topic was the communication we have. So a lot of times when we're intending to be supportive and we're intending to kind of help encourage and empower our youth, we're like how we're going about doing that. So just what are the conversations we're having with our teens? Are we knowing that we're not living in a life or we might not have the experiences that they're dealing with currently? Are we able to ask them about how they are viewing themselves, where are they placing their values? I think that came up earlier. And then also how are we communicating our own values around push for productivity and success, not just in terms of what we want our teens to strive for, whether it's with homework or college applications, but also just modeling in our own lives, like when we're not directly providing feedback, if we're just sitting around or we're doing our own work, what's the language we're using with ourselves, what are we prioritizing for ourselves, and how is that communicate, or is that communicating what we want our teens to take away for themselves? So it's not just about kind of, to me, encouraging with our words, but also recognizing, am I coming home? Am I able to set up boundaries for myself that kind of communicate that I'm prioritizing my me time? Am I coming home? Am I, how burnt out am I? Am I able to turn off from, looking at, checking work emails, doing work over the weekend? Am I, when I'm scrolling through my, news feeds or social media feeds, what is my inner dialogue, and how am I communicating that externally as well? I think a lot of times the messaging we send in terms of what priorities are not always what we're verbalizing and kind of outwardly communicating in terms of asks, but just things that are more implicit, and that that people that are messages that can be kind of taken away without us even recognizing. So my thoughts are around that, around being really being mindful and checking in with ourselves as well about how can I set the example of self-care, of relaxation in that home environment? How can I be supportive of my teens' growth and academic success while also encouraging those boundaries around personal time and family time and disconnect. So that's where my thoughts are when it comes to, you know, support in terms of the home environment.
I would
Thank you,
also, to
Suchita.
piggyback off that, sorry, Jennifer, to piggyback off of that, I would also say, are we communicating what we mean? So when we are, or are we communicating the end goal that we intend? So if we say, let's say your kid gets an A on a test and we say something like, oh, an A, but you worked so hard on that. What are we really communicating to that child? That an A isn't good enough, that their effort wasn't enough? And is that what we are intending to communicate? It's also remembering that our teens are very, very good at picking up on pitch, picking up on a little twinge in your face that you didn't even know that you did. And so making sure, if we just want them to do well and do their best, are we making sure that we're complimenting that effort rather than the end result?
That's great, Denisha. I just wanted to add, I think one of the things that I found to be most poignant when it comes to modeling that behavior for our family is Jason Reed's documentary. Jason Reed is a father who lost his son to suicide, and he created a documentary called Tell My Story. And in the documentary, he talks about that he never let his children see him fail. So he set this expectation that he was only about success when he had actually lost 3 businesses. And he just kind of shielded his children from that. And so they sort of put him up on this pedestal that was just a false, it just wasn't reality. And so just being able to, when you do have a bad day, be able to be open about that. When you opportunity to learn, it's an opportunity to grow, that we don't always have to be so perfect all the time in everything that we do. I think that really models that behavior that we want our kids to have, that that failure is apparent. It does happen, and really how you react to that failure or to something that may not be planned is, really that character and that resilience that we want our kids to have. And so being able to model that for them when we do fail, I think is really important.
I agree. I think growing and success can't happen without failure, because when you fail, you learn from the situation and you ask yourself, how can I change this process to do better next time? And failure shouldn't be viewed as an end-all situation. I think it should be more of a optimistic outview of what can I change about this process moving forward in order to become a better person or a better version of yourself. Suchita or Denisha, do you have anything else to add after that?
Well, I think the word failure is always just an interesting one, but I feel like I've been talking a lot tonight, so I was trying to shut up a little bit.
Fine.
But since you asked, Jennifer, so I think that failure is, as much as we have to define success, I think it's also defining failure, because I can't tell you the number of teens that I've talked to or parents that I've talked to that failure is a C. I remember my mom saying to me that C's were not allowed in her house. And I'm like, why can't I just be like everybody? Like, C's are average. Why can't I be like everyone else? But it was this push that I was supposed to be so much more than just a C student. My brain does not math. You ask me a question right now, I'm going to pull out a calculator. I'm going to use fingers. I don't math. I've never math. It's not a thing. As a social worker, I don't have to math, and it's fantastic. But for my mom, as well as I did in English, I was expected to do that same level in math and science and history and everything else. And that's not the way my brain works. And so there wasn't this push to really congratulate that effort. That C would have been the same as an F for my mom. It's not the same. And so again, I encourage all of us as adults, as parents, to just look inside yourself and what is it that we are afraid of, and what are we communicating to our child intentionally or unintentionally?
That's a really good point, because I think up until college, teens are expected to ace every subject, even if it's not their strong suit. And then when you get to college, you choose the major that you're passionate about, that you're good at. and you excel in that. And so then you look at high school and you're like, where is the difference? But it's that I'm good at this versus maybe that's not one of my strong suits. So everybody's brain is different. And I think this one size fits all for success in school is hard on the teens and puts a lot of pressure to meet unrealistic expectations, in my opinion. Suchita, do you have anything?
Just the last point to that, like speaking specifically to failure, I think that when we function on such a binary, then obviously, like Denisha said, like some of us are not, as inclined in certain subjects as others, and that, if that's not made to be okay, then it naturally puts the pressure to kind of make that grade happen one way or another. And that's where we find our teens getting into more of the unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy things and things that just we as parents would not want our kids to, struggle with or exhibit. And I think part of that is because it happens often if there isn't room to kind of communicate that hey, this is just really hard, and maybe I can put in all of my effort and this is going to be the outcome of that, and that being okay takes a lot of pressure off. Otherwise, I see it in a lot of the schools and with a lot of the professionals I talk with in the school environment of kind of the behaviors or the things that may that some teens will exhibit to try to pass that test, to get a good enough grade in that AP class. And sometimes it's easy to just focus on the behavior and be like, well, this thing wasn't allowed and they did this, or and from that angle and not look at well, what was driving that. And so I think, keeping that in mind.
So it's time for some questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I do have one question right now. It is, how do I, as a parent, manage my anxiety about my children's success? I worry that their current behaviors will never go away and I'll look like a failure to others. I'm going to pick on Denisha.
Okay, I'll take it. So I think it goes back to that, looking at what success is and thinking about, again, for all of us, the person I was at 14, 15, 16, thank goodness I am not that person as an adult. And that is okay. We all grow, we have our challenges. So I would encourage you to think about what success looks like for you, yourself and for your child, and to reframe what good parenting means. And that could look like any number of things. I think that, we all want to raise the lawyers, the doctors, the kids that are going to the academies, but are we raising good humans? Are we raising the children that open the door for people when they're leaving a store? I grew up in New York City, so do we have the children that give their seat to an old lady on the train or a bus, or when they see someone struggling, they help with groceries? I think it's defining what does success mean. And yes, you have teenagers. We're terrible humans as teenagers. Let's just put that out there. We are not our best selves. And I am grateful that none of us are being judged by who we were at 14, 15, 16. So just thinking about how you take care of yourself. How do you look at the positives of what your child is doing rather than those negative things? And how do you support and encourage those positive behaviors rather than the negative? So let's say your kid doesn't study as much as you would like them to study. I am a big believer in letting kids deal with the natural consequences of their behaviors. And I think in this lovely area of ours, we don't do enough of that. We want to shield kids from their natural consequences. If your kid's not studying enough, guess what's going to happen? They're not going to get a good grade. And that gross feeling is going to teach them something, where you can then have a conversation, not a I told you so conversation, but a, hey, what do we do differently next time? Because this feels gross and I don't like you feeling gross. So what do we do? You might want to talk to a friend about, I'm really concerned about my child. I think as a parent, parents don't do enough of that part of talking to other parents. So you think everyone else's kid is doing phenomenal and your kid is like this hot mess over here. And if you talk to other parents, you will realize they're all a little bit of a hot mess, and that's okay. But talking to a friend about how you get your support, like I'm really scared about my child and who they're going to grow into. I'm sure that the people that you surround yourself will be able to pick out those positive qualities of your child. Like your child is going to be a great support person to someone else, or they're so emotionally intelligent, or they're so kind and caring. That to me, again, more important than did your kid take 6 AP classes. So I would just continue to remind yourself that none of us are who we were as a teenager, and let's not judge your child and assume the worst in them. And I think that is the worst we can do as a parent. I think that's the worst we can do as a friend, as a support person. We don't want to assume the worst. They may be struggling right now. That doesn't mean they're going to struggle forever. And it's really important that we remind them that these struggles right now are just right now.
I think we also wanted to hit on the pressure of social media. I know, Denisha, you had some stuff to talk about on that. Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot again since you were just talking.
The spot is great.
We did just get a quick chat. I don't know, Jen, if you want me to read that or if you want to read that.
You can read it. I actually can't see it. So
okay. It was actually directly to me, so I'll keep that.
Does that mean go, Val?
Oh. Okay.
So I believe Suchita talked about this a little earlier, but the social pressures, not only the academic pressures, but I think a lot of times those academic pressures and social pressures sort of go hand in hand. I have a client that is one of those high achieving clients, and I actually thought she was going to fire me pretty early on in our working together, but she didn't. She kept me around. She was taking 6 AP classes. She was president of 4 different extracurricular clubs. She literally just studied. That was it. She went out one night a week with friends, and the first session with me was, I don't want to talk about how to make time for other things. I just want to be able to manage this better. And I am a straight shooter, if you guys couldn't tell. And so I said, for all of us, if we put too much on our plate, the plate is going to buckle. And I don't know how to tell you to be okay with a buckling plate. If you want to be okay with it, I support you, team cheerleader all day. But I can't tell you that I know how to fix your buckling plate unless we start to take some things off the plate. So she did. She started working on taking some things off of her plate and not spending all day, every day studying. And she went to school this week. And she was talking about all the kids that got their early decision and early action letters over break. And so the conversations about and the judgment about, well, I can't believe he got into that one. And oh my God, you didn't get in? Well, I got in. And she said it was so mean and so nasty. And it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to the kids that didn't get into the schools that they thought they would get into. But it also was this pressure amongst their friend group of how many schools to apply to and how many schools did you get into. So even if you got into you applied early action, early decision, you got into your dream school. Well, I applied to 10 schools and you only applied to 8, only 8. Monitoring your kids' social media is super important because yes, we can't stop what happens in the school building, but we can make sure that it stays at school and that it's not constantly coming into home. Those same conversations are happening over social media. The kids are wearing their hoodies and their cups and they've got their acceptance letters and all of that. We want to guard our children from the nastiness of all of this. we're not in competition with each other. We shouldn't be in competition with each other. How are we uplifting each other and rooting each other on? Like, oh, I'm disappointed I didn't get into JMU, but super excited for you. And that's right now, that's not happening as often as we'd like. I tell kids all the time that as a parent, you should look at what they're doing on social media and you should be aware of what's happening for them. A lot of these apps don't make a whole lot of sense to me. Snapchat will never make sense to me. But having those conversations, understanding how it's being used, making sure that there is a line where your child knows how to cut it off. So we don't need our phones on until 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning because the what if someone needs me? What if someone posts something? What if I don't respond? It's okay to say, okay, I'm just okay with what I've done, what I've accomplished for today, and I'm going to sleep. And I think those are really important conversations to have, that, again, not comparing ourselves to each other, but thinking about where our own personal strengths are, and then how do we capitalize on those strengths.
Mm-hmm. I also think, I don't know how they found out about what college they got into, but if, for example, it's on social media and they see this person posted their acceptance letter and got 50 likes and you only got 30, even though it's the same school, you base your self-worth and your success off of you getting less likes. And so it actually, you get increased dopamine when you see more likes and more likes and more likes. So it becomes an addictive factor. And so in reality, it's not about the achievement of the school. It's about how they feel about themselves in that situation. And so I definitely think social media has made this whole situation blow up completely in the past few years because of social media. So
I also think conversations about not comparing ourselves to others is a really important conversation. Like, I don't ever remember talking to my classmates about my ranking in school, or like what score I got on the SOLs, or any of, like, I don't remember those conversations, and those conversations happen a lot. So checking in with your child and, how are you doing with that? Oh, on your SOL, you got a 415 and your friend got a 418. How are you feeling about that? Because they may, as small of a difference that is, they may be feeling judged, they may be feeling inadequate, they may be really afraid of what their future looks like. Kids are also super aware of stuff that we are not always aware that they're aware of. With social media, they also have more knowledge and more insight into the world around them. I think Suchita brought up the social economics and what's happening in the world. That wasn't something that I really paid attention to when I was a teenager, but they're very much aware of that and aware of this sort of not truth of just because you go to college and you do well means that you're going to get your dream job and you're going to be successful. And I think because they are aware of that, it also makes it difficult to know, well, then what does success look like? And how do I guarantee that for my future? So again, just monitoring that social media usage and how they're looking at themselves and comparing themselves to others, really important.
And sorry. I was going to pick on Suchita, but go ahead.
One last thing, I was just going to say that I think there's, I don't want to fully trash social media. I think that there's great things that it brings, and I would encourage just having the conversation around, you're getting a snapshot of a person's life. You're getting one picture which is one small moment out of a million moments in a day. And for our youth, much of they were born with social media. That's not the case for many adults. They are growing up in a society where this is what they know. Their means of communication is this. And speaking to colleges and JMU, I just heard a student today talking about, well, if I don't get in, then I'm just going to tell everyone I did anyway, and I'm just not going there. And just that I think was a really useful thing to hear, because it shows how much of what our representative has to be, or what children are thinking that they have to put forward. And I think a lot of that is aligned with how people feel like they have to present themselves. It's not just about being online and posting and being present. It's about how your feed is curated. It's about, just where you're going. If even down to the I think you guys were talking about comparisons, like where you're going for, break or what you're doing, like everything becomes this comparison. And I think comparisons have always existed, but when we're constantly consuming that information, I think it's uniquely damaging. So I agree with earlier, Denisha was saying, like limiting that time, taking breaks and communicating to your kids that this is not representative or indicative of everything that's a part of this person's life. There's more to every single person, whether it's the average person lives down the street or your celebrity or what have you. It doesn't end with what's on a feed.
Well, I think, Suchita, just to add to that, I think the filter for which we are comparing is so much wider now, right? The comparison in the classroom when I was in school was the 25, 30 kids that were in my classroom, right? I think that now we're comparing ourselves to, an entire world of people who are on social media. So that bar of never achieving is so much higher and it's just so much greater. So I think that that's also something that is important in a conversation that I've had to have with 2 teenage daughters, is that, it's not reality. We don't, the term, the job description of influencer. I mean, that's a completely new job, right? You become an influencer on social media because of something that you're doing. That was not the reality, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So I think the comparisons are just so much greater, I think.
Mm-hmm. There's actually a job now for social media manager. You can just be someone's manager for an Instagram page, for example, and you don't have to have a degree for that. You can just curate their page to look exactly how they want it to and a picture perfect lifestyle. And I think the reaction to hearing teens complaining of like, oh, but their life is this and that, is to tell them just don't pay attention to it. And I think a lot of teens long for the empathy aspect and the validation that it's okay to feel those feelings, but I mean, they're going to happen regardless, but we need to learn how to be resilient through them.
Great point.
And then Denisha, I know you had some opinions on toxic positivity versus optimism.
Yes, I did. So toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is this idea that we always have to stay positive, avoid our pain. Pain is okay. Pain is a natural learning lesson. Optimism is looking at what could be and weighing all the options and looking at having more realistic conversations with yourself. And I think sometimes we want to boost ourselves and boost our teenagers up to a level that doesn't feel achievable for us or for them. So knowing that, we also have a message in the chat. Sorry, I lost my concentration. But knowing that we can support our children, knowing that we can look at the painful situations, we can grow from those painful situations. That's that optimism that we want to help them get to, that we want to look at where were our successes. I have a lot of clients when they come in and they want to tell me all the bad things that happen. And I'm like, but tell me about the good. Because I want to spend our brain energy on that good and on that positive and on that looking forward and being able to empower our children to know that just because we hit a bump in the road doesn't mean we have to stay there. Okay, you tried really hard and you got a B. Can we focus on the trying hard part rather than the end result? Because sometimes we do work hard and the end result isn't what we want it to be. And that's not a bad thing.
Thank you, Denisha. We got a message from... Oh, sorry.
You have a message? That's okay. I also just have one quick question. It's about, I'm going to just read it verbatim. My mom never encouraged me and really checked in on me when I was in middle or in high school. I really did well in elementary school, but once I went to high school, I slacked because of so many distractions. And essentially the question is, I wish that my mom had been on top of me a little bit more. So I worry about doing the same thing. How can I encourage my children in the right way so that they can fulfill their potential?
I'm going to pick on Suchita.
I think sometimes, I think you sharing that vulnerability speaks a lot to things. I know no one is perfect, and I think that our kids understanding that, you know, where we're coming from. Like, so sometimes like parents can just ask a million questions. There's the parent that may want to know every single detail of every single part of your life, and a kid might not necessarily respond to that versus, so it's, but understanding like, hey, this is a concern of mine. I want to make sure that, you know, I'm being there for you in the way that you need me to, and you know, allowing our kids to be the guides. Like every student, every child is going to be different. So I can't provide kind of a cookie cutter example of what one child is going to need. You and your child are going to know what's most important for them in their life at any given moment. And I think the vulnerability of even sharing what your own experiences were, I think can be helpful, and it can help humanize parents too. I think sometimes I think of my own family upbringing and things, and certain things where I may have been critical of my family members or my mom, that, you know, growing up, I'm, with time and with more communication and conversation, I'm able to reframe it for myself and look at it in a different way of, this was her, you know, kind of doing the best she can with her resources, and this was her engaging with me in this way because of her own fear. But it would have probably gone a really long way in that moment, and we would have avoided some conflict and some of my own anxieties had she been able to kind of communicate that what her fears were to me directly. So long short of it, I think having that conversation with your teen and kind of checking in will be helpful, and they can tell you if what they need is similar to what your needs were when you were growing up, or it might be something very different.
That's a great point, Suchita. I know we could talk about this way longer, but we are going to have to wrap up. So I am going to send out the survey. If you wouldn't mind filling that out for us, that would be really great. Our next parent panel is going to be February 9th at 7 p.m. Virtual over Zoom. It is a 30-minute screening of Hidden in Plain Sight, which is a docu-series that looks at both the obstacles teens face who live with mental illness disorders, and it is produced by Ken Burns and wants to bring light to youth parents, teachers, friends, and healthcare providers who face the struggles of youth mental health. So that is February 9th, and I'm going to put the link in the chat below. And we also have a parent support group coming up on Wednesday, January 25th at 7:30 p.m. So I will be putting both of those in the chat. Now, if you wouldn't mind filling the survey out as well. Those are the two links. Feel free to sign up. They are both free. And now is some extra minute, a couple minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. We have one more question real quick in the last few minutes. How do I communicate acceptance of myself to my child when they are growing up in a world of social media likes? So I guess we kind of hit on that topic, but I guess how can parents maybe try to understand that different kind of world? If any of you have some last minute thoughts on that.
So I think showing acceptance of yourself, I think it's being vulnerable with your kids. I think Suchita said it earlier. It's showing all those signs of those sides of yourself of, you know, today was a rough day. So I'm just going to, you know, go upstairs and take a shower for 30 minutes so that your kids see that sometimes you do have a rough day. Having those honest conversations, like, I'm really worried about you on social media, but tell me about it. Let me learn from you. Show me what you do, how you navigate this site. Just showing that we don't have all the answers and we don't know it all. I think that is the greatest tool that we can show to teenagers, that there's not this idea of you turn a certain age and all of a sudden you have all the answers to every question in the world. We don't. And so that's okay. We're going to have bad days. We're going to have good days. Are we only showing the good days to our kids? Are we hiding when we're sad? Are we hiding when we're frustrated? Are we hiding when we're tired? Not saying that your kids should see all of that all the time, but do they know that that part of you exists? Do they know that sometimes mom and dad need a self-time out? I think just being vulnerable and showing that you can't help your kid understand themselves if they also aren't understanding you. And I've had several kids that say, I don't feel like I can be transparent or vulnerable with my parent because they just seem like they have no flaws, like they're parent, but they're not human. And so I would encourage you just to show that human side of you.
Thank you, Denisha. Thank you so much, Denisha and Suchita, for participating in this panel. You both gave some really great information, and I hope the parents feel the same way. If you haven't filled out the survey, please do so before you log off. I hope everyone has a really great night, and I hope to see you guys at the next parent panel.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.